Good morning, everybody, and thank you ever so much for joining us, especially in the light that we're directly opposite Stephen Chandler in a really interesting. Well, I don't know whether it'll be interesting, but I'm assuming it's going to be a really interesting session that's on at the on the other stage, as they might say, at Glastonbury. So we're definitely not the pyramid stage, but we are the other stage.
Probably jazz.
Sorry, Sean?
The jazz stage, I see us as.
Oh, is that okay. We're a little bit more niche. Okay. So thank you ever so much for joining us. We've got I'll just introduce you to who we are. So I'm Angela Catley, and I'm from an organisation called Community Catalysts. There's very definitely some familiar faces in the room. So hello to those, and hello to the less familiar ones as well. Can I introduce you to my colleague, Sean?
Hello.
You're going to say who,
do you want me to say anything about it? I'm Community Catalyst as well, but I've been shielding for the last year. So this has been a project which has had a deeply personal impact for me.
Thank you, Sean. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Clark. I'm also with Community Catalysts, and I've been working on the Valuable and Vulnerable project.
And Kerry?
Hello, I'm Kerry Davies, and I'm representing the Valuable and Vulnerable project as somebody that ran a project myself.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Kerry. So I think we're going to make a start. Sean, have you got some? So you're going to share the slide?
Yes, I am. I am doing it, I hope, now.
Yes. Oh, look at that. And don't look at these captions, because I don't think the captions and a Yorkshire accent go terribly well together. So we've been having some very, very funny captions. Thank you, Sean. We're going to talk to you about a little project. Well, we're not going to talk to you too much about the project, but we're going to tell you about the things that we've learned, the people that we've met, the opinions that have been shared as part of a project that we've called Valuable and Vulnerable. It's been happening over the last 6 months or so. It's come to an end now, and it's being absolutely fantastic. And Kerry is one of the people who we have connected with and learned from. And I'm really grateful to Kerry for joining us and sharing her expertise today. Can I start by asking people to share in the chat box their name and why they're interested in this, why you've come here instead of Stephen Chandler? What is it that's drawn you to this session? Why are you interested? Now, I've realised I can't look at the chat. While can you, anybody, Chris, can you see the chat? Or Sean?
I can't now.
Oh, that's very good. So we're going to ask people to look in the chat, and then we can't see it. Let's have a look.
I'll have to.
Right, well, we may well have to scrap that plan if we can't see the chat and share at the same time.
I can see it.
Aha, so Casper's saying hello. Tom says the coffee is better on this stage. Probably made it yourself, Tom, because I make rubbish coffee. Amanda from Research in Practice and a social worker, here to learn about lived experience. Thank you, Amanda. Anybody else? Margaret, interested in the term vulnerable. Oh, aren't we all? And been supporting a couple who've been shielding for the past year. Thank you, Margaret. Chris from Kent County Council, want to hear about people's experiences. Thank you, everybody. That's really. Oh, Sarah Burslam from McIntyre. Oh, I've got loads came at once. Sarah Burslam from McIntyre. Value people more than processes. Yes, thank you, Sarah. We would hope for that from everywhere, wouldn't we? Jenny, who's been shielding and who works for a disabled persons organisation with people supporting each other. Gwen from McIntyre wanted to learn more about the Valuable and Vulnerable project. Kirsty from McIntyre. We've definitely got a good McIntyre contingent. Julie, principal social worker from Kent, wanting to hear about how we really make people valuable. Anna McEwen, interested because our members with brain injuries live isolated lives. I'm not going to read every single one because you're all putting some fantastic stuff in here. The theme seems to be that people are interested in valuable and vulnerable as concepts, and also that people are interested to hear from and about people with lived experience of shielding. Would that seem to be fair? So thank you very much, everybody, for sharing. We're gonna work you through a report that we've written. We've written it using PowerPoint so that it's a set of slides as well as a report. And in the chat box, we'll get in a minute, I'm going to share the actual report so that you can see that if you haven't seen it already. So can I ask you to move to the first slideshow? Or maybe I can. Can I do it?
No.
No, I can't.
No, you can't. I've moved to the welcome slide. Do you want the one after that?
Yes, please, if that's okay.
Lovely.
We've tried to write the report in a way that isn't too many words. We're all really conscious of the fact that there's a lot of written stuff getting published at the moment, and all really, really strong information. But after a while, I don't know whether it's the lockdown or the isolation, but certainly we felt that if we were going to get something that people were going to engage with, it was much better to do it quite clearly and simply in an engaging way, and not get into too much detail. So I hope that people agree that is quite engaging. We started off thinking about the concept of us and them. We've got help from Anna Geyer at New Possibilities, who's done our graphics for us here. And she did. I said to her, could you do me a graphic on us and them? And she produced this lovely little picture at the bottom right-hand corner here of these jelly baby people, which I thought was really, really powerful. In the fact that actually we all need to be part of a tribe, and by being part of a tribe, that leads us to labeling of other people who are not in that tribe. So us that are in the tribe, and them that aren't in the tribe. Can I have the next slide, Shan? So it's an absolute irrefutable fact that some people are more at risk of serious illness or even death from COVID. So COVID is a real risk to many, many people, a higher risk than it is to many others. And to manage this risk, the government's just came across the shielding policy. And I think everybody would agree there's been strengths and there's been weaknesses in that. But perhaps at the very, very beginning, when shielding became a thing, I think generally all of us, even people who were shielding, felt that was a positive thing. That was might not have been perfect, but it was definitely somewhere on the right planet. So from the people that we have spoken to and talked about shielding, there was a really strong view that there was positives and negatives to shielding. And one of the negatives was that at the beginning, and more over the last 14 months, there is a view that shielded people are them and not us. So there is a yeah. So let's have the next slide.
Oops, sorry, got carried away there.
The danger with the them and us is we've shifted from a description of people's circumstances to a labeling of our fellow citizens. And And we now routinely, I think, and certainly the media and the press routinely use phrases like vulnerable people or even the vulnerable. So we've moved from the fact that this is about actual individuals being actually more vulnerable from serious illness of COVID, to creating a whole group of people who are different to us, who are the vulnerable. And that language has become ingrained everywhere and more socially acceptable. And what it's done is it's created a really big them and a really big us in a way that we don't think is positive at all. Can I have the next slide?
I get carried away with the slides, Angela. I'm really sorry.
And I've got just got a few headlines and policies and stuff. Look at the one on the one in the middle with the Union Jack on. It says new COVID-19 funding to assist the vulnerable elderly. I mean, and that's a government document. You know what I mean? And what kind of language is that? You know, vulnerable, at risk, shielding advice. You know, so much language that is not positive. I'm just going to see. There's been a couple of comments in the chat. So Margaret is saying she really agrees with the slide and that vulnerability is universal, fluid and shared, not a static identity as suggested by the label. And absolutely agree with that, Margaret. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to pass you on to Kerry, who I'm hoping is going to talk a little bit about the impact of vulnerability labels.
Could I have the slide, please? Thank you. The co-production group felt the vulnerable label causes significant harm, and with this label, people are viewed as only individuals that have needs to be met and not part of the problem and not the solution to it. It makes people believe the hype to expect less and value themselves less and inspire less. Could I have the next slide, please? Protecting people in this way can make them feel dependent, cocooned, stigmatised, beaten down and worthless. These are really negative connotations. Could I have the next slide, please? One of the co-production team, Vicky, gave her opinion. She said that COVID-19 put me in a position in which I was at risk of being defined by my impairments rather than my personality or the things in my life that I have control of. That's really damning if you think about it. When discussing the project, it was discussed that there were needs to get balance right between being both valuable and vulnerable. Everybody is vulnerable and valuable at the same time. Sometimes people need protection to keep themselves safe, but this does not mean that they can't shine, grow, connect, or give to others. People should always feel protected when they need it, but not feel trapped and isolated. Every human being has a value on this planet. People are friends, parents, partners, workers, bosses, volunteers, active citizens like all of us today in this conference, campaigners like all of us today, and most importantly, change agents. Could I have the next slide, please? There are many other stories available for you to read here, as you can see. Please do read them and click the full story. David commented that this was an important part of your value may come out of your vulnerability. We all have roles to play in seeing and valuing the vulnerable. There are some links on this slide where you can look at playing your part in valuing the vulnerable. I'd like to hand you over to Chris Clark now for us to just speak about my project.
Thank you, Kerry. Can I have the next slide, please, Sean?
You can. Hang on. I'm not a very good slide person, am I? But here we are.
Okay, so there are lots of stories to read. We haven't got time to share them all with you today, which I regret really, because there's some lovely stories. So please do visit them. So I'm going to start off with organisations that we worked with first. And we worked with a few organisations and two housing organisations, one of which was Stonewater. So I just want to tell you a bit about their story. So they saw this project as an opportunity for them to follow their long-term commitment for a strengths-based approach. So they wanted their staff to look at starting at a point with what people can do. So quite often with organisations, when there is support available, they look at what do we need to do, and it was very much about actually turning that on its head and looking at not what we need to do, but what can we do together with the people who are our customers or our residents in order for them to connect, to contribute and to fill some of the needs and requests that they give to us. So we trained 46 staff in the project area. And some of the things that came out of that was that one of their residents was making some beautiful handmade cards, and then they helped her to design an article to go in the newsletter offering that service if people wanted bespoke handmade cards. They had somebody who wanted to talk about books, and together they came up with the idea of starting a book club that was on the phone. So finding several people who were interested and just buddying them up so that they could have one-to-one conversations about books. There was some of the staff wrote in one of the newsletters about a happy time in their life, and then asked the tenants to do the same. And they had several for the March newsletter and more coming forward for the April newsletter. So again, those stories help them to build the relationships and see, recognise people's skills and what they do and things they've done in the past. There was a person with dementia who wanted to offer befriending. He loved to chat about gardening, but he also liked to talk about his past, which included he'd been in the army, he was a champion swimmer, and he'd been building road bikes. And so he was keen, and there was nobody in that particular scheme to link him to. So they were looking at linking him to another scheme in a different area to offer that service. So there was another group of tenants that had a community garden, and although it is maintained, they decided that they would all brighten it up and plant seeds and do some work around it. And they went on to to win a competition for Stonewater housing site. They won the gardening competition. And then one of the ones that's really, really inspiring is that there was a lady that identified she was no longer able to walk her dog, and she really loved her dog. That would have led to a conversation around rehoming the dog, but instead staff talked to other people locally, other residents, customers, and found people who love dogs, who like dogs. And now there's a team of 3 of them that are walking that dog for the lady. And you know, it might not have been something that the staff could have done as part of their role, but actually linking them to somebody who could do that must have made such a difference to that person not having to give up her dog. And I think it's, you know, it's a really heartwarming story that by connecting people and doing these things, by working with organisations to change the way they work, it can impact on so many lives. So that's just an example of one of the organisations we worked with. We also worked with individuals, and I was going to tell you about another one, but let's move on to Kerry and ask Kerry what you did and why you got in touch with us. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, Chris. I contacted Clenton for Harvest and MBE because I felt isolated and I felt that I wanted to be involved in the disability rights movement. And he suggested Valuable and Vulnerable. And as part of that, I wanted to write my own 3-hour social enterprise course for beginners, because I run my own small social enterprise as a volunteer. So I delivered it to 2 people who were thinking about setting up their own small social enterprises. It helped them to gain basic knowledge of how to begin a social business.
Right, shall I move on to this quote?
I think so, Sian. Thank you, Chris and Kerry. That was really well. There are loads of stories. I've put the report in the chat, and you can click through to all the stories. Kerry's stories is there, the Stonewater stories there, loads and loads of other stories, and also all of the opinion pieces that we're quoting here, written by members of our co-production group, largely ranting about the concept of vulnerability. So yes, thank you, Chris and Kerry. I've gone, Sian.
Right. I suppose this quote is just one of those, isn't it? But it was interesting right at the beginning of the project. The project was originally called Valuable, Not Vulnerable, and the co-production group felt very strongly that it was valuable and vulnerable, and that was because vulnerability was a real part of everybody's lives. So it was a very, as I said at the beginning, it was a very personal project for me, this, because I was shielding. I was bombarded with language about vulnerability. So even though I was working at home every day, running Comcat's Community Catalyst, I was still feeling hugely vulnerable. Very scared in that first lockdown. I don't know if you remember the kind of language that was bombarded at people. And so this project, which kind of tried to, was about flipping the story, was about saying, yes, we might be vulnerable, but look at the value people have, and let's help other organizations work to focus on people's strengths, and let's try and help change the story about people who are shielding. So we, the co-production group was a really amazing group to be part of. There were kind of 10 or 12 of us, weren't there, Angela? And they were, it was full of opinion and full of strong conversations. Out of it came a set of recommendations from us about how to change the story to help see and value valuable while acknowledging this vulnerability as well. And we recognise we all had a role to play in that, both individually as somebody shielding, it almost a kind of note to self, what do I need to do to keep strong and to keep a focus on being valuable, but that other people also need to do more to focus on strengths, the strengths of the people that they are supporting or have responsibility for. So we came up with a set of recommendations, but what we're really interested in now is actually what you think, what you think individually you can do to change that story, to change the story from pure vulnerability to value. So this is a challenge. I'm slightly challenged because I can't see the chat. So I'm going to require, what I'd like people to do is either put their hand up, I won't be able to see it, or but other people will, or put in the chat, what should we each individually be doing to change this story? You can look at our recommendations in the report, which is in the, as Angela's put as a link in the chat. So any thoughts, anything from this small but beautifully formed group that we should be, that people would like to say? I'm relying on Chris or Angela to be able to see the chat. Or hands.
I can see the chat.
That will be easier, I think, than scrolling through to see all the hands.
Okay, anybody saying anything, Angela? Otherwise, I'm talking to myself here.
Sorry, I'm looking, sorry. So Malika says we need to acknowledge the external factors that lead to vulnerableness.
Agree.
Really good point. Jenny says highlighting the strengths, skills and connections that people already have as a way of valuing the valuable. Amanda says use our own individual power and agency to reduce stigma, for example. Catherine says think about how we talk about things and make connections. And then Tom saying something about maybe Tom could unmute and share his yes, go on, unmute Tom and tell people what you said about the jazz stage and the main stage.
All right. I said earlier the coffee was better in this stage, but actually the reason I wanted to come onto this stage because I've learned a lot from it, and we need to listen to one another on this stage. But the other stage have got lots of money and lots of power, and I know lots of time when I've tried to question the term vulnerable people to people in power, they dismiss it. Well, that's the word we use. That's the catch-all phrase for service providers and this system to provide services to you because you are vulnerable, and that's their priorities and that's their jobs. And how do you unpick that way of seeing you, them, the vulnerable is a challenging one. So I find the way you've done this, you've acknowledged there's a problematic use of this term vulnerable. You've not totally rejected it, but you've tried to turn it around and associate with valuable. I find that interesting because just saying it, I've tried it many times over the last years, just to say, shouldn't use that term. Well, that's what it is. You get nowhere. So I found that interesting. Thank you.
That's really interesting, Tom, and thank you. We did a Twitter campaign. I think Angela can talk about it better than I can, which was really challenging people to acknowledge all of us are vulnerable at times and all of us have value. So it was a Twitter campaign which said, I am valuable because I am vulnerable because, Angela, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I think the suggestion came from Anna, the Social Care Future Inquiry lead person. And we had a really strong involvement. People were, we purposefully said we wanted everybody to share why they were vulnerable and everybody to share why they were valuable. And that included people who draw on social care or healthcare services, and also included people who didn't. And I think when we're all forced to think about what makes us vulnerable, we realise that it's not us and them. You know, it's us and us. You know, and I think the campaign. I think the campaign really highlighted that because we had such a strong involvement from such a wide range of people. The other thing we had was an opinion piece from Anna, which you can get to via the report. And the best quote, I think, that came out of the campaign was, if I put you in a room with a lion, you'd be vulnerable too. You know, and I think the campaign made people realise that what we all have circumstances in which we're vulnerable. It's not something that is exclusive to people who need health or care services. There's some other comments lots of other comments in the chat, Sian.
Okay. Can you bring them to me?
So I can. There's a discussion about language. So Chris Mackenzie is talking about the language, the fact that there's a lot of speaking in acronyms and code. And Vic, I can't see Vic's surname or even any details. I can only see Vic. Sorry. Talking about using positive language. So there's quite a bit of discussion about that.
It's very interesting. I think absolutely, Vic. I think that relentless tide of language around vulnerability and shielding to save the NHS, not to save you, but to save the NHS. There was an absolutely a tsunami of not just you're vulnerable, but you're a burden. And I think that was very interesting for me to be on the receiving end of. And of course, it's language that many people are relentlessly subjected to. So using language, positive language, and it's so wasteful to write off amazing people just because they happen to need a bit of care, a bit of help to live the life they want. And if you can draw upon people's fantastic skills, as this project in part did, you release a kind of creativity and energy, which is going to be vital to our recovery, I think.
Casper's got a hand up. Karen is talking about how uncomfortable it made her feel to have to join the campaign and share her vulnerabilities, and talking about identity. And Rose is talking about instead of highlighting the barriers, let's think about the solutions. So yeah. I don't know whether Rose, but definitely Casper with his hand up to start, but whether Rose or Sarah or Anna or Karen want to join in, Sean.
Okay.
Casper to start.
People have to unmute themselves if they want to join in. So could you choose the first person? I'm a little bit stymied because I'm sharing.
I think Casper to start because he's got a hand up.
Lovely.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. I think for me, a big part of this is all about co-production and support. Very much with co-production from a perspective of the kind of the sharing of power and skills and knowledge and equality. So where they are identifying people as vulnerable means there is a lack of a skill or a perceived lack of skill, ability, talent, knowledge, whatever in that individual. And if you can find someone or a place or a community or a community of place or a community of people that can fill in that missing gap for the individual that makes them that unified whole entity, then they're going to be valued because there is no more vulnerability in that lack of space, if that makes sense. I know that's a bit theoretical, but I didn't mean it to be.
I don't think that's theoretical. I think that's really, really helpful and intensely practical, actually, that, you know, actually when you focus on value, there is the vulnerability just sort of goes to the margins, doesn't it? And helping people coming around somebody.
Yeah, so I mean, it's even in the simplest terms of if somebody is for example, one of the people we support is extremely talented poet, but they are visually impaired, very much visually impaired. So if we as staff can facilitate and support a way to overcome that, for them to be able to create the work that they want to, then that's taking away that vulnerability that they have, or that lack of ability that is perceived. It's not about something being missing, it's about providing a tool to make that something easier to do.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Sean, there's a suggestion that you stop screen sharing so everybody can see each other. A good suggestion.
Okay, I will do that. I will get nervous because then I've got to screen share again, but I will do that. Hello, everybody. And now I can see the chat as well.
So I think that people who might want to share, I don't know, but Chris, Mackenzie, Karen, Anna, Sarah, and Rose. That's a lot of people, and we've only
In
got...
that order, Chris Mackenzie then. Chris, can you unmute?
Yeah, I'm trying. Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of thoughts from me, and I put something in the chat. I do think the language we use is incredibly important here, and it's really fascinating to hear, you know, the perspectives of the people on the call about the use of the term vulnerable, and how it, particularly during the pandemic, became a catch-all for a group of people. I'm really interested in what's been said about you know, everybody having vulnerabilities and everybody having value, and it's about how we recognize those and particularly use people's values as well. I guess for me, one of the things I was just reflecting on as people were talking is is how our kind of traditional approach to commissioning services gets in the way, and it reinforces those kind of perspectives of people being vulnerable, because what we tend to do is see somebody in the context of what we can offer them, and often what we can offer people is a service, and it's a service from a traditional menu of, you know, it's domiciliary care, or it's a residential care home, or it's supported living, and so it kind of stymies our creativity and our ability to see people as individuals and to think about how we might recognize their strengths and build on their strengths, because the services that are in place are traditionally those that are designed to, you know, deal with the vulnerability and not the value.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, and I know because I'm familiar with you know, the work you guys have done in Community Catalysts, and that kind of, you know, different approach, which is about, you know, how can we build support around people which is based on the value they bring, and just interested in other people's perspectives, whether they've seen really good examples elsewhere of, you know, where there's a, you know, different approaches are helping, you know, people to build on people's value rather than their vulnerability.
That's a good challenge, and it would be great to, if people can, we'll save the chat, so just anything you can put into the chat. But now I knew there were other people. Karen, was Karen the next person, Angela, to speak?
I think we're 5 to 12, Sean.
Okay.
I need to go at 5 to, of course, in a couple of moments. So I'm going to tell you, I think there's some, Jenny has got some, an interesting comment. Karen, Anna, Sarah, Rose, you're not going to get them all. I think maybe Rose, if Rose is willing to share her suggestion around barriers.
Rose, can you unmute yourself?
Can you all hear me or not?
Yes, beautifully.
Oh, you can. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I just think I think whether it's practical or verbal, you put the barriers in place the minute you categorize someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think rather than saying, oh, you fit into this category, so therefore you can only do this amount, or you can never achieve this, I think it should be a case of people going, well, it'll be difficult for this to happen for you, but if we do it like this, would that work for you? And put them in the driving seat rather than driving them somewhere and then putting them off in the middle of the street or something. You know, at the end of the day, it's their destination that they're going to. So I think they should be allowed to have as much independence and drive themselves there as much as they can, rather than have somebody else do it for them. That was mainly where I was coming from.
That's great. I love that quote. It's their destination they're driving to, not the destination of other people. I think it's a really great quote.
I've just realised I've got my timings wrong. We're running till 15:15. I thought we were running till 12, and I was panicking slightly. So
I have got time.
Yes, I'm going to go in a little minute. I wonder whether Chris might be willing to monitor the chat in my absence.
Yes, of course.
Chris, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I think maybe Anna and then Sarah Buslam would. Really good comments, worth sharing. And I will leave you and say thank you very much. Hope the rest of the session goes well.
Thank you, Angela. So Anna, you're talking about identity and multiple facets of identity. You're able to unmute and talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Sean. I'm Anna from Headway East London. We're a brain injury organisation working across North and East London. And I think that identity is where we should start, like, because we've all got all these different identities. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're all doing an awful lot around diversity and unconscious bias and all this stuff at the moment around diversity, equal opportunities, race, all of that stuff. But actually, if we think about that, because often that starts with identity and who you are as a person. And if we start with that, for the people that we're working with, the people that we're here to serve, actually, we talk about them as brothers, sisters, mothers, daughters, fathers, you know, all of these things that make us who we are. And if we started with that, rather than you're a person that needs a service. So what we do at Headway East London is that we talk about people as artists or as writers or as musicians, because they've all got these amazing skills that they're coming to learn, to enhance, to develop. And so that's the language that we use, and we don't ever talk about people as service users. And I just think that we go through these cycles of what do we call people and what do we, you know, and that's even, I was just looking at Twitter actually on the main stage, they're talking about social care is not about keeping vulnerable people. So they're still saying vulnerable people on the main stage, as Tom said, and that's on Twitter. So you know, until we shift that and actually look at who people are, and sort of name that and start using that language, I think, you know, we've talked about language, but it comes back to who people are as people and their identity, I think.
That's really helpful, Anna. Thank you. Sarah Burslem, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, hello everybody. Well, the point I made in the chat was around it was quite incredible, wasn't it? Just the ease that the language, we just slipped into this language of vulnerability, and I think the ease around that just sort of demonstrates really just how you know, the values of the public, the value of the government, etc., etc. So and that was quite scary, but we've talked about language. I guess the point I wanted to make was around trying to think around what the barriers are and how we break them down. I mean, part of the issue, I think, is the fact that people, organisations, communities who sort of connect with what we now know as social care become very fragmented very, very, very quickly. And in that fragmentation, people's voices are not heard. The value sort of proposition gets lost, and people then start to be very, very busy doing very, you know, in essence, what is considered to be, you know, positive things. It becomes very, very fragmented. So what I love about this particular project that Community Catalyst has done and the wider social care future movement is the fact that it just brings things back to some simple principles that we all need to live our life and do our work by, which is around seeing people's strengths. It's around community resource, etc., etc. So and I think we have to prevent that fragmentation, because I think, as I say, people's voices get lost and value propositions get lost. So focusing on people's strengths, focusing on the 5 challenges that we've heard this morning from Social Care Future is sort of, we've all got to get behind that to prevent this fragmentation that just makes us all quite weak, I think.
I completely agree. I think the other battle we have to fight is with the press, the media.
Yeah,
because I think there's the language of vulnerability has been absolutely seized on. And you know, the press love the kind of pity stories, don't they? Look at this vulnerable person and how amazing they are, but it's all about their vulnerability. So I would love ideas from you all about how do you challenge the press? How do you create a public environment which focuses on the artist and the poet and the creative person rather than on their vulnerability?
Well, you tell stories. You know, stories are good. So all the as the project that you're talking about this morning demonstrates, it's flipping that on its head. It's you know, it's talking about people's strengths and people's skills, etc. And obviously we need to be telling more stories.
Yes, I mean, Anna's said, has asked the same challenge, really, haven't you, Anna? How does this the language that you as the head of Headway use, how does that filter through to the local authorities, and how do we influence language and thinking within local authorities who may still be thinking duty of care, need, you know, how can I afford to meet this need, rather than here is a person, an amazing person, and how do we help them, you know?
Yeah, but I also think there's something about actually that recognition that we're all vulnerable, and you know, there's quite a lot of work around, you know, in the leadership space at the moment about vulnerable and bringing your vulnerability to work and all that sort of stuff. And the more that we normalize the fact that, you know, actually we're all vulnerable, and that's, but I think that's still, it's that, you know, that isn't normalized yet, is it? It's not kind of widely accepted. So you know, there's something about changing the conversation with local authorities. There's something about normalizing the fact that, you know, we're all vulnerable in loads of different ways, and we all feel vulnerable, and that's okay. Because at the moment we see vulnerability as weak, don't we?
We do, and as the only identity, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Have you any other thoughts from people? I'm kind of trying to look at the chat as well, which is, if I look distracted, that's because I can't multitask anymore. So, oh, Julie says, agree with Sarah about the power of the story. Captain Tom, who wasn't seen as vulnerable at all, was he? And he was just an amazing man. So yes, but it's sometimes not having heroic stories as well, because there is a challenge, isn't there, when you look at Captain Tom and think, well, I just couldn't do that. Whereas there's all sorts of other amazing everyday stories as well. Casper says, trick the press into doing live streaming so they can't censor or edit the content. I think that's a brilliant idea, Casper. There was any other...
There was a comment from Malika. Malika, I don't know if you want to speak.
I don't really have much to add to what I said, but yeah, just this idea that lots of times you hear that language isn't important, that there's much important things we should be focusing our time, energy and attention on. And, you know, I would sort of say, well, actually, it does indicate whether we truly think and feel that people are valuable, and, you know, and that filters through into our behaviours, the way that we work with people. So I would say it is really important, and it's probably a two-way thing. You know, if you start using the right language, it starts to change your behaviour, as well as if you're using the right language, your behaviour is probably coming from the right place in the first place. And when I used to work as a manager for social care services with adults with learning disabilities, one of the things that I used to feel much more happy doing in an employment form was, if I had somebody who had zero experience in adult social care, I would prefer to go with them if the language that they used was valuing and respecting people, than if I had somebody who had years of experience but actually told me that they didn't really kind of understand those things about how to really support and engage people in that personal and sensitive way. So that was all from me.
No, that's helpful. And I think there was a comment right at the beginning which I wanted to pick up on, which links to that, Malika, which is that there are, you know, stuff that makes us vulnerable. You know, there are inequalities, not just health inequalities, but housing and roads and air quality and all those things which create vulnerabilities that do need tackling. But that doesn't, we're not saying don't tackle those inequalities. What we are saying is this: if we focus individually on what people want to do, are doing, are amazing at, you ensure that support and services actually are doing the right thing and are focusing on enabling people to live a life, not just getting people to fit into a residential care or domiciliary care service, and seeing that as the limit of the role of social care. So I've got a few more comments. I'm aware of time creeping on, and I need to finish off so that you don't feel left stranded. So I've got Chris, the use of the wrong language can normalize a culture. I absolutely agree, Chris. It's you can see, you saw it in the kind of Winterbourne view language. I was thinking about that the other day, you know, just the othering of the people they were supporting, and the complete lack of recognition that people had any kind of gift or talent. Other comments, Chris, that I've missed before I go back to screen sharing just briefly, just to let you know where we were. Oh, there was something. Vicky said we need to attract. We need to try to attract. Hang on, I'm going to try. I can't read my chat.
Try to attract, invite people who do not normally come to meetings, etc., like today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because the problem with self-selection has happened is that the people in this room are people who think this is important, and there is something about how do we get people in the room who have never thought about this, or who don't. How do we challenge the journalists who know that the kind of pity stories get viewed? How do we move to many more Captain Tom stories, and whether we could capitalize on Captain Tom's story to say there are loads more stories out there of people doing amazing things, all as poets and creatives. So anything else that people want to say before I just very quickly finish our presentation? And it means I'm going to have to go back to screen sharing, and I apologize for that, if I can. Whether I can actually.
Sean, do you want me to share my screen? Is that easier?
You would be, that would be lovely. Can you flip through to, are you there? Are you able to?
Yes. Yeah.
Lovely. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
That's it. Oh, well done. I'm the right part. So we our co-production group did look at what everybody can do. And this was really, for me, it was a note to self, you know, actually a lot of it is, you know, hold on to that creativity, hold on to your value, and become a role model. We talk quite a lot in the co-production group about the importance of role models for everybody. So people who've lost sight of their value, being able to see other people who they feel they can, who gives them inspiration and hope. Could you have the next slide, Gaynor? We talked about policymakers, supporters and commissioners, and this is all about what Anna's talking about really, and Sarah, which is focusing on what people can do and what journey they're on, where they want to be at the end of that journey, and it's their journey, not anybody else's, and consciously creating opportunities for people to contribute. People who have been bombarded with the language of vulnerability for years, we all know that. You lose sight and confidence in your own value, and it can take time and encouragement for people to be able to kind of get back in touch with what they can do. Next slide, please, Gaynor. And this was the media, and with this slide, we absolutely, it's how you do this, I think we'd be interested in your comments on. It is actually getting the media to start to recognize that the vulnerable pity me stories that they're so keen on don't necessarily attract viewers in the way the great strong Captain Tom stories do. And maybe we have a role in getting more of those stories out to the media, and helping to change that culture that way. I think you're right, Sarah, is all about stories. And we have a role in that, in ensuring that people, the media, we have relationships with the media, and the media understand and begin to be changed by what people are trying to do. So next slide, Gaynor. This was just comments from people who were involved in the project, and I think the one I value most actually is the one that says, I was able to be creative during a dark season. I think, you know, the value of the project, there's a much broader strategic value, but actually the impact on people's lives was what made this important. So next slide, please, Gaynor, is Anna's quote. I think it's lovely. She's absolutely right. We would all be absolutely terrified. So, you know, vulnerability is a situation, and it doesn't define the person. And then finally, this is the bit that Angela would have done so well. If you could take me through to the grey slide and then the one after, the grey slide very quickly, which, yes, that's it. That's it. Go back to the project behind the learning. Next slide, that's it. So this is just to tell you about the project. There is a report, a link in the chat to it. It was a 6-month project which was funded through, you know, the government's Coronavirus Community Support Fund. We wanted to flip that story, we knew that there were, you know, 2 million people shielding, many of whom were being ground down by that relentless narrative of vulnerability. And we wanted to focus, change the story, focus on what people are doing and amazing at, and to help both organisations and individuals in 2 areas, West Midlands, West and South Midlands, or the Midlands and the South. Is that right, Chris? To do some to help people to begin to take some ideas and do some great things individually and organisationally. And as we said earlier on, we had a Twitter campaign, and we have generated lots of wonderful stories, which are part of what we need to now use to start to change the media story around people. It was co-produced throughout. The co-production group was wonderful because it was a group of people shielding of lots of different backgrounds, very engaged in the project, felt very strongly, felt its value very strongly, really shaped what we did. And we hope, and they hope, the other members of the group, that they will continue to be able to take up the challenge that has just been outlined in this project, and start to do some more direct work to change the views of commissioners and the public view. Would you say that's right, Chris?
Yes, definitely. I think it's work that will continue. Some of the influence that's happened through the project will lead to more happening around change the narrative.
That's brilliant. And I've got to 12:15, and I know they're finally their time saved. So could you flip to the last quote, Gaynor? That's it. Oh, it's actually from me. Sorry about that. So I hadn't realised that. I have realised from firsthand the power of language to empower as well as alienate, and it's just keeping hold of that and being really conscious about how we use language from now on. Thank you all hugely. We would love to continue the conversation, so do feel free to tweet us or connect with us through our email address. We will be trying to take this to new places, and we'd love your company on that journey. So thank you very much. It's now lunchtime and time for you to either go off and have your own quiet private lunch or join the lunch group that's meeting informally now. So thanks so much. Really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. See you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sean.